Well, hello everyone. I'm here with Roni White, and we're talking about the very sensitive subject of suicide. In our last video, and I encourage you to watch that if you haven't already, we talk about the person that's experiencing suicidal thoughts and what they can do, and how they're not alone, and they may feel they're alone, but they're not. And most importantly, God is with you. But today we're going to focus on how to help someone who is dealing with suicidal thoughts, and also how to help someone that is a survivor of maybe a loved one who took their life, and how they can cope with that. So without further ado, Roni, again, thank you for being here with us. And so how do I've had relatives who deal with depression, anxiety, and have suicidal thoughts and everything. So I'm sure it's pretty common.
Yeah.
So but not everyone, and even I oftentimes feel like unequipped to deal with it. And a lot of Christians, well-intentioned,
Mhm.
will just say, well, just go read the Bible or just pray more and stuff. So and that's not always, I'm not saying that that's not helpful to read the Bible, but it's like that's incomplete advice, and a lot of people need a lot more than that. So how do you help someone through this dark valley?
Yeah. And thank you for calling it Dark Valley, right? And
Yeah.
that's what it is. And understanding that, first and foremost, understand the person's in distress. They're in a dark valley. And so therefore, it's not that the Bible's not helpful, but when you're under that much distress, it's very hard to take in new information. So telling someone to go read the Bible or anything, that might be so hard. Sometimes their brain is so foggy and it's so much pain that to sit down is even more distressing, or to try to read. So that's why that can be unhelpful versus, first and foremost, letting the person know you care, letting
Yeah.
them know that you are there. And it's okay to say, I don't know what that's like, or it's okay to say, I hear you and I'm concerned for you. You know, let's try to get you some help. Because if you don't know, then the most important thing you can do for that person is try to get them help, which is, it could be a crisis center. It can be calling 988 with them, which is the national lifeline. It could be, if you know that they're in therapy, contacting their therapist or encouraging them to contact their therapist. It could be taking them to the emergency room. It could be calling a deacon or a spiritual leader or a pastor and letting them know what's going on. Or, in the case if they belong to Olney Baptist Church, they calling and getting in touch with the pastoral care and counseling ministry so that this person can get support,
Mhm.
first and foremost. So telling the person to do something might not be the most helpful in that moment, only because what you might ask them to do might be something that can be very hard for them to do in that moment. And sometimes the person just needs someone to listen. Most of the times that's what they need. They might need someone just to sit with them. Sometimes it's not even about talking. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
about someone either literally holding their hand or metaphorically holding their hand,
Mhm.
or someone, a shoulder for them to literally cry on,
Mhm.
or metaphorically. I mean, because honestly, just really being a shoulder, a
Yeah.
hand, sometimes holding that person,
Yeah.
maybe they need comfort. Um, and so sometimes it is nonverbal in that moment to get to the next moment, right?
And in some cases, it could be the person may not necessarily be wanting to talk about the stuff, but maybe you can be there just to kind of take their mind off things, and help them. Let's go for a walk. Let's do something, something like that.
The
Um,
next thing, sorry, so that's first and foremost. The next thing that's important, if they express to you that they're thinking about ending their life, that they're thinking about suicide, because they might not say, I'm ready to complete suicide, or whatever language they might use. They may say something like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. I I give up. I want to end my life. So listening to these different ways, and then you can check in. You don't have to assume that it means they're about to have a plan for suicide, but you can say, are you thinking about
mhm.
killing yourself, or are you thinking about suicide? And that person will respond. You're not putting the thought in their head. They'll either say, yes, or they
Yeah.
say, no, I just don't like this. And then that's another conversation because
Yeah.
maybe, but if they say yes, the next question you can do is, do you have a plan? Or even if you can't remember that, are you going to do that? Are you thinking about doing that today?
Mm. Mm.
Right.
Hmm.
And if that answer is yes, then you can call 988 or 911
Yeah.
or crisis. They need immediate intervention at that point. And if you're a person that you feel like I don't want to be involved, but honestly, getting that person help is the most caring thing you can do.
Yeah.
And if you want to stop your involvement at that point, that's okay. But it'll be just the same as if you saw someone, if you're in a restaurant, they grab their chest and they fell over, you would hopefully call
Yeah.
911.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're going to the hospital with the person,
Yeah.
but getting them that help that they need. And if that person does say yes to their basically thinking about ending their life, and if they follow up with they have a plan or they're saying it will be
Yeah.
today, it's the same need that they need immediate intervention at that point.
Hey, I want to ask about that because a lot of time, this was my case too, early on. I was afraid to ask that question of people because I didn't want to give them any ideas, but you and I have talked about this before, but it's actually good to ask those questions, so because if the person's already thinking about it, they're already thinking about it, so
Yep.
you asking and bringing up the subject actually can be freeing because it takes the problem and puts it on the table, and it makes it easy. If you break that ice, it's easier for them to talk about it then. So
Absolutely. And it destigmatizes it because a lot of
yeah.
people keep suffering in silence. They're so scared to share what it is that is going on for thinking that they're going to be judged,
Yeah.
ridiculed, um, invalidated. And so if you are able to calmly, and another thing is, as frantic as it feels, as alarming as it feels, you being calm is another very essential step in helping the person.
So if the person says, yes, I'm thinking about suicide, I'm thinking about today, and you can tell they're an imminent risk of that, then the best way would be some options would be like, let's hold on a second. I'm going to call 911 or 988 right now, and I'm going to sit here with you while you talk to this person. Okay. That's probably the most friendly way to do it, I guess, and then, or, hey, let's get in my car right now. We're going to the hospital. That's another option.
Or going to the
Or
crisis center.
the crisis center. If they don't want to go to the hospital or they don't want to go to the crisis center, then it's like, okay, can you make an appointment? Is this an option? I need you to make an appointment with your doctor right now. I want you to call your doctor's office right now. I want you to tell. I'm gonna be right here with you. I want you to tell them what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and at least that gets them in touch with medical professionals right away. The doctor will then probably tell them to go 911 or whatever. But or let's say they refuse to do any of that, and they walk away from you or whatever. Do you report that? Is that something you call the police yourself? And or how do you handle that? They walk away from you. They're not cooperative. What do you do then?
Yes, if they walk away, if they say they're not going, I'm going to do this, you call 911, because really they need help, and now you're getting them some help. Because if you try to chase them down, you can also put yourself in danger if they do have,
Yeah.
um, a lethal way of completing their plan.
Yeah.
And so, and so I'm talking about, whether it's a knife or a gun or some type of weaponry that they are choosing to
Hmm.
use, that can get dangerous for you as well. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that, if you know kind of where they're going, or if you know them, you can follow at a safe distance while you're calling,
Yeah.
911. But at some point, it might not be helpful to engage. I mean, I was part of a case in the aftermath that someone did complete suicide with a shotgun, and their family members were wrestling with them for a while, trying to get it away. And, as I heard the story, that could have went,
That could have been bad. Yeah. Real bad.
yeah, we could have been looking at multiple ends of life.
Yeah.
What ended up, happening, the person kicked them all out of the house and barricaded, and then took their own life. But that could have went so many other directions with more tragedy, and it was already tragic. So, calling for help is important if the person is refusing the help. And because remember, more than likely it's the distress talking, it's a lack of problem skills talking, it's the limited perspective of not being able to see it another way that's talking. And what you can do is get them help and keep yourself safe in the process.
So that's if it's like an imminent situation where it's like, I'm going to do it today kind of thing. But what if they say, it's crossed my mind, I'm not ready to do it yet, or that, you get the impression that it's not imminent.
Yeah.
But they're definitely thinking about it. How do you handle that situation?
So then you say, if you're willing, so this is, again, it always goes down if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to talk. And if you're willing to listen and talk, also, unless they are non-communicative, try not to be the only one talking and try to monitor that.
Yeah.
And even when you're sharing, slow it down and don't, like, literally take a slow, have a calm, soothing voice. And you might want to talk to, first, when you get if they give you an understanding about what's going on, you can use, without invalidating, first, acknowledge like how painful that you hear it is for them. It doesn't matter if you see it as painful or not, what you hear them saying. And then you might want to share, like, if you have, if you know of people or your own self that have been able to make it through certain circumstances, not that you're telling them, oh, because they did it, you can do it, but you're showing them, like, there are different ways to address this. And then you follow up, would you like to learn more? And that's another way to get them connected with someone. If you feel comfortable and you can hear that they're looking for solutions, it's not that you give them a solution, but you can help them then, like, well, let's think about different things and get them in talking.
What
right?
if there's, like you mentioned, calming down? I just want to take a moment on that because that's important. If it's a parent who is talking with their child and their
Yes.
child is contemplating suicide, it might be hard for that parent to calm down. So what, like you get the fight or flight thing kicks in and the parent can start to panic, and so what do you do if you feel like this is a dear loved one, and it's very upsetting to hear that. And then there could be feelings of guilt, that you're dealing with, maybe I failed as a parent, I've failed as a spouse, I failed whatever. And it's like, so how do you calm down? I mean, what can you do to, and stay in control and not have a panic attack or a nervous breakdown yourself, in this?
Okay. So yes,
I know there's a lot there, but it's important.
Yeah,
because
but it's
like,
important because as a parent, as a loved one, it is alarming when your child or your loved one is telling you that they want to end their lives, and the amount of emotions you're going to be flooded with. Yes, you are going to be flooded with an incredible amount of emotion. And to calm down, because just as if it was any other emergency, the more calm you are, the more you're able to problem solve, the more you're able to lead the way. And so just understanding that if you're going to have emotions, and it's not about not having emotions, but it's about not allowing them to spill out into the room, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you may need to take that deep breath and remind yourself, my child or my loved one needs me right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is hard, and yet I need to find a way to show up. And if you need to quietly say a prayer, to ask for calm, to ask for guidance, to ask for strength, to ask for the Lord to take over your tongue, in that moment, do that, because you don't have to rush to say something, right? So as a parent, you can hug your child while you start praying to calm yourself.
Mm-hmm.
and then engage, right? You can even tell your child, I know a lot of parents that the reaction is to plead with their child about how much they love them. Now, granted, it is important that your child does know that they love you. Oftentimes, that's not why they're
Right.
thinking about suicide. So that's not really going to be the statement or the sentiment that says, "Oh, okay, then I won't do it."
Right.
And I know we think that, but honestly, that's not what that moment is about. And yes, you still can share with them how much you love them, but yet more needs to be said about you also see the pain that they're in,
Right.
and that you care about that, and that you're here for them to help them find a way, and remind them that this is in a very loving and a very acknowledging way. Yes, there are going to be times in life, and this is one of them, it seems like for you, where there's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And there are ways that we are equipped with, that we learn, that we are given. And so when I'm saying that, I'm also pointing to my Bible right now,
Hmm.
to learn how to work and live in the pain and work through the pain. And I know this is hard, and this might be something you've never experienced before. So it just feels out of control. It feels impossible. And I just want to let you know it's not impossible, and it can end at some point, and this doesn't have to be the way for it
Right.
to end. And you can acknowledge, yes, I see that this is an option that you are thinking about,
Hmm.
and this is not the only option that exists. So it is important to even, and this is hard. This is very, very hard, but it is important to recognize that that is an option that they're thinking about,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because if you're
Yeah.
just thinking like, no, you can't, well,
Yeah.
you know, and it makes it really hard. And it's one of the most challenging experiences a parent would be experiencing
Yeah.
also, right?
Yeah.
And so it to be calm though, it is important, just as if, for parents that experience, say, their child choking. I'm not saying every parent that experiences that it remains calm, but the ones that do can administer first aid, right? Or if the
Right.
child's drowning, but if you're panicking, time
Yeah.
that is necessary to really enact and intervene can be lost. And so
Yeah.
it's almost remembering that, and you can have your emotions later,
Yeah.
but in the moment, it is important of calming self,
Yeah.
getting in control to be what your child needs at that time, or your loved one needs at that time.
I had a pastor that once said, if you're in a boat and your loved one jumps in the water and they're drowning, it doesn't help for you to jump in the water and start drowning too. So it's like
Exactly.
you have to help from a position of ability, to help and
Yeah.
strength, really.
Because, right, if you're in that boat, it might be more important for you to throw out that life preserver on the
Right.
rope and reel them back in,
Right.
right? So that you can pull them up. So like thinking about that, so that throwing that life preserver out, that might be
Yeah.
the moment that you're praying.
Yep.
Reeling them back in is talking to them calmly.
So one thing that when it comes to what you say, um, I really don't make it about you unless it is about you. I mean, so
Yeah.
unless you've done something to hurt this person and that's causing their trauma, then in that case, that's a whole different conversation. I mean, in that case, it is appropriate for you to apologize profusely and
Yes.
and 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 hold yourself accountable, and like, I'm gonna get help myself. I'm gonna turn myself in, face the consequences.
And also ask them, what do they need?
Yeah, it's like, not, I mean, so God forbid, I don't want to get too blunt on a video here on YouTube, but it's like, if you're guilty of abusing your child, then you've got to stop that, and that can cause suicide ideation on the part of the child, or if you're a spouse abusing, but assuming that you are not the cause of this, that you haven't done anything to hurt, then I think if you start to apologize over and over again and say, I love you over and over again, in some respects, that can actually just add to the burden that's on your child or on your spouse, because now they feel like they've got to help you and your emotions, and so it's like you don't want to make it about you unless it really is about you. So
and you don't want to give them guilt.
right.
So,
Right.
and if you're dealing with an adolescent, which, sometimes the suicidal thoughts can be coming out of friendships and relationships that are occurring that are distressing them.
Right.
So just telling them, oh, this won't matter in 10 years, that's
Yeah.
an adolescent, it really does not conceive that. We only can because now we're
Yeah.
past that period of time, but they're not. And what they know is now. And
Yeah.
so again, acknowledging how important friends are at that stage or these relationships, and acknowledging the pain that you're hearing them, not what you were, not because of what it was for you. Now, granted, if you did have that experience as a adolescent, there's a way to share that without making it about you, and just saying, I'm hearing you, I'm hearing your pain. It's reminding me,
Yeah.
of a time in my life where this was really hard too. And, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
You can find other ways. Let's talk about what you need. Let's talk about how this hurts. Because sometimes it's about expressing all the hurt. And sometimes people are so ready to shoo that away that the person doesn't get it all out,
This is why it's important to be checking in with your child all along, so they know they can come to you.
Mhm.
That's one thing my parents were very good at. I knew the lines of communication were open. So if I was dealing with stress, anxiety, problems at school, I could always talk to them.
Yeah.
And
And then that could be, sorry, a moment to
yeah,
also the parent, after you talk and you understand the hurt, then before even the next step can be, let's pray together, because
yeah,
that's another
yeah,
opportunity to, and if you need to lead it, and showing, like, giving thanks to the Lord, right? Like, so first acknowledging who the Lord is, giving thanks to the Lord about things. And that's already helping with perspective about the things that are going well, the things that you are appreciative of. And then the ask, in that moment, what the need is, and you're leading the way, and then leave space for the child to do it as well, right? So you're
yeah,
also modeling, you're doing, and you're giving space. And then that alone, right, can help with what the next step needs to be, depending on what comes out of that, right?
yeah,
So you might not need to go to the ER. You might be able to call a spiritual leader or a therapist, and that might be the next step, because what has been relieved now might be enough that it might not have to be the crisis center or emergency room, or it might need to be. And and then, if whatever that next step is, again, you can pray after that and keep talking, keep being there, keep being supportive. And some people, they are scared to talk about, because I don't want someone to look at me differently.
mhm,
So be mindful of how you think of the person. Be
right,
mindful of
yeah.
how you are expressing your concern, and show that it's in love, not in fear.
So what if you have a situation where you've got an individual in your life, friend, relative, core family member, whatever, who has ongoing mental health or emotional health issues, and you're exhausted, and so it's like you care, but you've had these conversations multiple times, and it's just an exhausting ride, that you're on. What kind of encouragement can you give to someone like that, so
That is an excellent question, because that is a real circumstance that many people do experience.
yeah.
And so, yes, if someone is in a perpetual state of mental illness, where that it can feel, for those that are trying to be supportive and want to be supportive, that it becomes exhausting. One thing I would say is evaluate how you are showing up, because it might be that you're doing more than either you're equipped for, or more
Yeah.
that is necessary. So it might be that you or going beyond your means. And that doesn't mean that not caring, but it might be that you're taking on the role of someone else that's more equipped for that role. And so possibly, when they're calling you, let's just to say let me just build a scenario. I guess they call you anytime they call you when they're in this distress, it ends up taking 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes, maybe on the phone, or if you go over there, it's always, longer than 3, 4, maybe even 8 hours.
Yeah.
And maybe it's starting to happen more rapidly. Possibly in those times, you've forgotten that there is the crisis center, that there is their therapist, that there is their primary care physician, that there is the ER, right? And so maybe the resources that are available are not being utilized, and you're not encouraging them to utilize that. Possibly that when they're calling you, you're not, how can I say it? Maybe you're not checking in with them about like, what are the things that are going well? Or maybe you're not giving time limits to some of it, right? And saying like, what is it that you need? And maybe sticking to that. So like, it can be exhausting. And oftentimes it's a time to evaluate how you're showing up and what ways can you still be helpful and also not exhaust yourself. And
So it's
find
like, is
that
it
balance.
a lot of people feel guilty putting boundaries, though?
Yeah.
But this gets back to the position of strength, right? I mean, if you don't have any boundaries, then you're going to end up being depleted very quickly, and you're not going to be in a position to help the person. So and I guess the other thing, what if that person doesn't respect those boundaries and or refuses to take advantage of these other resources, and they just want to talk to you, and they may even say guilt trip things like, well, if you don't talk to me, I'm just going to end it. I mean, it's how do you navigate that? So
As I said, I'm glad you asked that question and about boundaries, because boundaries are the whole conversation itself, yet they are very important. They protect you. And it's really not the other person's responsibility to respect your boundaries. It's your responsibility to uphold your boundaries. And so you can use loving language. So let's just say what you just said, like they only want to talk to you. They feel like you're the only one. And remember, no one person, no one human being can be another human being's everything. The only source that can be your everything is the Lord. And so no one human being can be another human being's everything. And if you are positioning yourself in someone's life that way, then that is a boundary issue. And that is some other things that are to work on for self. But in this scenario, and if the person then threatens suicide for your attention, understand then this is incredibly unhealthy. You hear the term, it's toxic. And that's not going to go well if that becomes the pattern. So, and if you feel ill-equipped at that moment to insert a boundary, that's a sign for you to also seek some professional guidance and therapy. And in the moment, the one thing I can share then is telling the person, I care about you. I hear you. I just heard you say that you're ready to have a plan of suicide. Let's call 911 or let's call 988 or let's get to the ER. Right. And so now if they say this each time, there's action. Whether it's the crisis center, the emergency room, 988 or 911, depending on how lethal and what's happening. And if you do that each time, now your time is not going to get hijacked, because that's what I'm hearing, to just be able to be the only person for them. So that is another way of showing a caring boundary. If they're threatened, that the minute you hear that threat, okay, then this is what we need to do. Right. And then working on self of ways to, when you're engaging with that person and they are discussing their problems, maybe it's the languaging that there's no language of problem solving. And it's all about, I'm going to use these venting and or complaining. Right. And when we're complaining, we're almost in a victimized mindset of, I'm not saying all the time, but just restating what's going wrong. When we're venting, we are lamenting about how things are going wrong, how it's bothering you, what you are experiencing. And those two have their time and place, and there needs to be movement.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is about resolution, about relief, about problem solving, and so I'm not saying that those two things cannot exist. However, they really do have bookends.
Yeah.
And then it's about movement, because if you stay here, you can become distraught, you can become hopeless, you can become helpless. And hopelessness, which is, another factor in suicide, when you don't have hope, it is a very empty, distressing space that seems it's incredibly disempowering.
Is it fair to say that, though, again, speaking from the standpoint of a caring loved one, that if someone that could be, especially if it's a child, your parent, a child, especially then, but a spouse, chances are they need more than just you, like you don't need to feel guilty for recognizing that you're not able to carry their burden all by yourself. That really someone in that situation needs professional help, and you can be there to help them get that professional help, and connect with those resources. Even if you're a parent, I mean, this is something where, I would assume that you could speak to the school counselor, you could talk to your primary care physician, take your child in. There's resources there to help you. The spouse, same thing. But I guess, don't take it upon yourself, the guilt or the feeling that it's all on me, because that's what's gonna make it even more exhausting for you.
Yeah, we have so many resources out, just as if your child was experiencing migraines.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to relieve that always on your own, or if they have broken a bone.
Yeah.
There's interventions that are needed. It's the same thing, you have a role in this, and so do other providers to get the care. And I do want to say, because we all are human beings, and I'm going to be very honest right now. We all are human beings. We all live in a fallen world.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you reach out to even a professional, it might not always be the most positive interaction. And I would then encourage, do not give up. There are other professionals, but that is a real experience where some people do not receive high quality care. And that doesn't mean that's going to be every professional you interact with. So just remember that there are other professionals, and that shouldn't be what stops you from seeking assistance and help and guidance. And I think that's really important. And
Completely
so there will be people, there will be professionals, there will be even spiritual leaders that will disappoint us, that will not meet, will not rise to occasion, or we will not have a positive interaction with. And yet they're not the only ones that can be helpful in your situation.
Yeah. The same thing in church. You say, well, I tried church. It didn't go well. Well, how many churches did you try? There's I'm just pulling up the statistics now. There's 380,000 churches in the United States. So chances are you've not gone to all 380,000 of them, so it may be that the church you reached out to can't help you, or maybe they've got a bad pastor or whatever, but there are other churches, there are other communities. And so I'm sure the same thing is true with the medical field. You get another doctor's opinion, another counselor's opinion, So now let's talk about, okay, so, the person that is a survivor of this, I just talked with someone recently, and they know someone whose parent committed suicide, and that's traumatic, or a parent who's lost a child to suicide. a spouse that's lost a spouse to suicide, whatever, and they're dealing with feelings of guilt and I
Shame.
mean, that just takes grief and magnifies it,
Hmm.
100 times.
Hmm.
So how can you help a person like that? What advice would you give to someone in that position, and then someone who's helping a person in that situation?
Yeah. So, this is um, a really important conversation. So for those that are survivors of someone that completed suicide, it is, like a very compounding grief state to be in. And there's a lot that they're experiencing internally, from the grief itself. There often is guilt. There's often shame, and sometimes that's self-inflicted shame. Sometimes it's shame because of the societal stigmatizations. Um, Sometimes there is, existential crisis. They can start questioning their own belief. They can start questioning, um, God and God's sovereignty. Like there's just a lot of things, or they feel they can start experiencing helplessness, thinking God did it to them.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot going on there and more. This is just, some of it, but some of the very, concerning parts that can really change a person's well-being,
Yeah.
you know. And so part of the shame can also come from the fear of, what are people going to think? What are people going to say?
Yeah.
So, if you're the one that is going through this, um, there is supports. There are a lot of both in-person and online support groups of, professionals, and those that are also in the circumstance of experiencing this type of grief, um, and to help and guide you. And a lot are led, spiritually led. There are a lot of Christian led, um, support
Mhm.
groups. Of course, there are grief counselors. There are therapists that specialize in grief and complex and compounding grief to help you. And I would say, first and foremost, to connect in with those resources, for support. Um,
Mm.
when it comes to also really looking at the spirituality, the existential crisis that can occur, this goes down also having a trusted spiritual leader, to turn to, because you do not want someone that is going, I'm just going to be honest, you do not want someone that's just going to tell you, no, you just need to keep
Yeah.
leaving. You need someone that's really capable of listening to you, talking with you, sharing with you, praying with you, listening to you, right? Like you really need someone that is comfortable in their spirituality and their understanding of this type of grief, that can be with you and be patient with you. Um, and think times like this, I really do think back to Job and
Mm.
his wrestle with it all. We all know he stayed connected to God, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't in distress, and that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that he wasn't distraught. And he was. I mean, it
Yeah.
explains it in so many
Yeah.
ways, but I think sometimes it gets glazed over the amount of emotional pain he was in,
Yeah.
right?
And
And God allowed him
yeah.
to challenge him. And when I say challenge, like express his upsetness, his confusion, his displeasure, right? His concern, his pain. And he kept talking with him. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just finished reading Job, and it's like, so it's fresh, and I mean, I've read it before, obviously, but
Yeah.
I I think one of the most painful things for him had to be when his wife came to him. It's like, so, and after everything he's gone through, and they've lost their children, he's suffering all his health issues and stuff, and she says, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Just curse God and die." I mean, that had to be just devastating. So it's like you're in a situation where even your loved ones are kind of against you, and then his friends show up, and I think the first 7 days they just sat with him, and that's what a good friend should do. And if that's what they would have done, that would have been a positive example, but then they started talking and they just made things worse. So, anyway, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
no,
comment
no,
on that.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because unfortunately, when parents experience their child completing suicide,
Yeah.
there's a high statistic. I don't want to say the wrong one, but I do believe I think it's close to or over 50% that a divorce follows.
Yeah.
So it's really important to seek guidance and support and help so that you
Yeah.
can stay connected, and how to be connected, and how to have conversations, because it's not as simple as what people think happens of why the divorce happens. Sometimes it's the fear of talking, and so you're both living together in isolation,
Yeah.
and then that's more pain. Sometimes it is about the blaming, but that's anger. But there's ways to truly healthily express that anger and all the questions that need to be had, and that's professionals are here to really help with that. And it is about, as much as, I mean, for a parent, it is very common that they end up spending more time in bed and starting to withdraw and isolate. And
Well, you
like
got
you
to,
said, so it's important for that support system to come to where the parents are and show up, and sometimes just be there,
yeah, I mean, the
cooking
couple,
for them. Mhm.
um, humanly speaking, produced that child, then that child takes the life. And so it can be understandable that the husband and wife are going to associate their spouse with the child in a sense, it's like, and
Absolutely.
so it's like, it's like, I don't want to deal with this pain. So part of the withdrawal is you withdraw from your spouse, and so you withdraw from your support, your biggest support network there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt, but
No, that's okay. Well, it kind of leads to the second question, but yeah, the amount of pain is almost indescribable
yeah,
that a parent will experience when their child dies by suicide.
yeah,
And of course, when their child is deceased, period, that pain is almost indescribable. And when you add another component of suicide,
yeah,
so that alone, to be honest with you, any parent that is experiencing it, that pain that you are experiencing, it is real. And there is a way to continue living. There is a way to
please talk
continue
to
living.
someone, please get
Th-
help.
There is a way to continue living, and it's about the support system around you.
So let's talk. I mean, one thing that's on my mind right now, and I feel like I need to ask this because guilt is a real thing
Mhm,
in general.
mhm,
But let's say that there is some merit to the guilt, not that the parent was abusive or anything, but let's say they had an argument with their child
mhm,
before the child took their life,
mhm.
and so now that's haunting the parent. Two husband and wife had an argument, and then one of the spouses takes their life, and it was an argument, but that's haunting them now. And this is one of those examples where, family dynamics being what they are, there's going to be times of arguing, there's going to be hurt words exchanged at times, and because no one's perfect, we're in a fallen world. But the timing of everything, where it was like a trigger that just was the straw that broke the camel's back or whatever for the other party, but now the party that's left has to live with that guilt.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person, to that's just beating themselves up and maybe even just sabotaging themselves,
Yeah.
because they can't get past that guilt.
Well, twofold. First, I also want to say sometimes it's timing, but sometimes the suicide might not be about what you think it's about.
That's true.
Um, and in that, the only thing I can say right now, because there's so many factors to that,
Yeah,
is if that's what you're experiencing, seek professional counseling
yeah,
to able to really completely dissect and process that and build skills around it, because there are many factors and there are many circumstances. And even if I mean, other than someone telling someone else
mhm,
directly to go ahead and kill yourself,
yeah, right,
that
yeah,
responsibility of someone else's behavior
right,
in that regard of what they chose to do to address the problem is not on you, right? And so there are many ways to really work on that and find your healing and find your closure and find your even if you are looking for reconciliation, or even if you're looking for absolution, or even if you're looking for redemption, or even if you're looking for to be forgiven.
Yeah.
Seeking out a pastoral counselor, a therapist that does see the whole person with the spirituality and all, that would be the way to experience what you're feeling in a different way, with relief, with a pathway towards living. I mean, no one can tell you that it's all going to completely go away. The only guarantee we have of that in scripture is through believing, through living in the word, and then once you pass on into eternity, having God wipe your tears away, that's when the full and complete pain is resolved. However, while we're here on earth, there are ways to live with varying degrees of pain and to experience an enriched life, even with tragedy.
I want to just add, from a pastoral perspective on this, that Romans 8 is a great passage to meditate on and read in general, especially when you're going through a valley. But on the guilt side of things, if you've given your heart to Jesus, then your sins were paid for at the cross of Calvary, and you need to receive that forgiveness from God. And now Romans 8:1, there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. And the joy of your salvation will be most evident when you're walking according to the Spirit. But if you start walking according to the flesh, then you're gonna be like David, and you're gonna need that joy restored. And so, I echo everything you said about the counseling, needing that spiritual counseling and professional counseling. But I would say, the starting point, the foundational point, is your relationship with God. And, First John tells us that, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And so, I don't think anyone can say they were a perfect wife or a perfect husband or a perfect parent. So you no doubt made mistakes, fell short, committed some sins, made some bad choices. But you need to confess that first and foremost to God, receive his forgiveness, and he will help you then process that and walk that out.
He will help restore you. And part of that restoration, there are things that he may ask of you,
right,
and he wants you to grow, and he's going to give you opportunities to grow. So I think the one of the biggest things is to remember, this isn't about magic, and this is
right.
about, growth takes also your energy and your commitment and changing things that, that need to be learned, things that need to be unlearned, things that need to begin, things that need to end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a process, a lot of this. And I guess gets back to the thing is, you're not alone. There's support networks out there too, for people who have survived loved ones that have taken their life and that have been left behind, and connect in with those and stuff. I think it's very important. Well, this is a very can be a very heavy topic and a very difficult topic, but I thank you for taking your time to address this for us.
Yeah. And lastly, I just want to say, to those that are in any type of relationship with someone that has lost a close one to suicide, is don't forget them. Check in on them. Cook a meal for them if you can cook. Show up in different ways, but within your means. And I would say avoid saying, "I'll do anything. What can I do?" Because oftentimes that's not true.
Yeah.
And even if you want to do something, and it is important to know what they need, or sometimes people have a hard time articulating, and think about what you're capable of and what you're seeing a need is, and then do it. Because sometimes it might be dropping the other kids, if there are other kids, off to school. It may be raking the leaves, or it might be, coming in, sweeping their floors. You'll be surprised from what might seem like the smallest tasks can be the most loving and the biggest need, so to speak. There are some families that are not going to allow you to just come in and sit and talk with them. Sometimes they do insulate within themselves, but that doesn't mean there aren't things that you can do to show that you see them, that you care, and that's okay. Sometimes they don't want to talk about it, so still, right, remembering all their other interests and being there to talk about other things, and that's okay too.
We
Purposely
focused
avoiding it is
Yeah.
not always helpful if they do want to talk about it. So it's a balance, and you can even ask them directly, do you want to talk about, and you can name the person, and they might go no, and then move on to something else. It doesn't have to be awkward,
We've focused on helping people that we know
Mhm.
are going through this, but I just want to close out on, we interact with people every day, or most every day, certainly every week, and on the job, at church, in the community, in the neighborhood, whatever. And have no idea what other people are going through right now. And so I love the proverb, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. And I feel that one of the things that we as Christians should do is cultivate a merry heart in ourselves, and then spread that to others, and I find, social media and a lot of places like that, it just breaks your spirit, because of the toxic nature of things on there. And so maybe if you could just talk about what are things that you can do just to spread that. And I don't want to sound new agey here, but it's like just to spread positivity, and just show the love of God to people, and just try to convey, have a merry heart yourself and spread that merry heart around, because you don't want to be the one that contributes to breaking someone else's spirit, so
I mean, that is very true. And so one thing is, it's important for you to care for the light that's within, that light that comes from God, and to shine it out to others, to draw people onto God. And, leading with that, just understanding what you give out, it does matter. And it is going to affect people. And that's really a lot of what that scripture says. I love that scripture, because it is talking about your responsibility of how you show up in this world, and how you show up in situations, and how you interact with people. And it's not about blinding people with your light, because you want them to come to your light and be welcomed in. So a lot of times the way that you're living, it can help people, go, wow, how are you doing? And being honest, like saying, it's like, for example, some people ask me like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm blessed, I'm weathering life storms, and and I'm enjoying the rainbows. So I'm not detailing all what's going on, but I'm trying to show like things aren't all great, in a sense. Like, there are storms in my life, and yet I have joy, and I'm blessed. I'm meaning there's balance. And I'm able to manage them, and I'm able to, in the same time of a storm, also experience, joy and happiness and fulfillment. So, even sharing that, to don't discount the things that might be challenging to you, but there's ways to share it to people, to show them and how you honor God in everything that is going on. And so how you show up is incredibly important, because that can also give some indirect guidance to someone else, that can be encouraging to someone else without you even having a full-fledged conversation. to that person.
Another good one on
And
this point is just to echo what you're saying is Proverbs 12:25, anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. So just speaking a good word, into people's lives.
like, Jesus also said in Matthew how, words can defile the soul. And
Yeah.
so our words, how we language with people, how we interact with people is powerful. We are soulful beings, amongst other soulful beings. We don't understand how powerful each and every one of us are. And because we are built to be relational beings, it is important how we relation with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, like, here we are in church, and right now, you have people that are in person, you have people that are online. And it's important not to assume if
Mm-hmm.
someone is like lonely because of how you perceive. There are people that could be living with a family that can be feeling incredibly lonely, and people that live by themselves that can be completely fulfilled and engaged, and vice versa, of course. So don't assume because the way that you see someone's situation that you think how they're doing versus find out how they're doing, and so in other words, even if they're in a household of people, to have an assumption that they're okay can be erroneous.
Yeah.
And because someone lives by themselves, to have an assumption that they're not okay can be erroneous. So therefore, check in on people just by saying, if you really mean it, how are you doing? If you don't mean that, then I would suggest saying, because, we just automatically say, how are you? How are you today? But I would recommend, if you really don't mean that because you really are not ready and equipped to hear it, then just say, I hope you're having a good day. Or, I hope today goes well for you.
Yeah.
Right. You can express your hope
Yeah.
versus the inquiry that
Right.
you might not be prepared for.
Well said. Yeah. But it's like, another proverb, death and life are in the power of the tongue. So it's like there's our words have an impact.
Yeah. Speak life. Do not speak death.
Yeah, exactly. So many good Bible verses on this. But thank you, Roni, and thank you for the work that you do in speaking life into people and putting a good word into people. And thank you for this. And so if you or someone that is struggling with suicidal ideation, 988 or 911 are good go-to numbers to call. And also, I would encourage you, and know Roni would encourage you to seek help. Seek help from a professional counselor or therapist, and who can assist you in that. So,
and you're
again,
truly not alone.
Yeah, you are not alone.
You are not alone. You have God, the creator, the provider, the Alpha and Omega with you always in everything. And you are on this earth where there's over 7 billion other people. You are not alone.
Amen. Well, again, thank you, Roni, and thank you all for joining us, and God bless you.
Thank you.